before therapy, before antidepressants, before Instagram. Humans still got sad, deeply, catastrophically sad, and they developed rituals to survive it that we've almost completely abandoned. Some of them actually worked better than what we do now. Here's what we rarely stop to think about. Sadness is not a modern invention. Grief, loss, despair, hopelessness, these are as old as consciousness itself. Ancient humans buried their dead with flowers. They carved images of the people they lost into stone. They sat together in the dark and made meaning out of suffering. And for tens of thousands of years, with no clinical infrastructure whatsoever, they survived it. Today I want to walk you through what they actually did, the specific rituals and practices prehistoric and ancient cultures used to process emotional pain, and why. Neuroscience is now quietly confirming that some of those approaches were more sophisticated than we gave them credit for. Stay with me, because the last one on this list is the one that modern psychology is only just beginning to take seriously again. The first and most consistent thing ancient humans did when they were sad was gather. Not just gather in the vague sense, but gather with specific, structured rituals around grief. Archaeological evidence from burial sites going back over 100,000 years shows communal mourning practices, bodies laid out deliberately, grave goods placed with care, evidence of gatherings that served no survival function except to mark loss together. In hunter-gatherer societies studied by anthropologists, grief was never a private experience. It was a collective one. The community didn't leave the grieving person alone to process, they moved into closer proximity. They sat together for days. They wailed together. They made noise that matched the internal chaos of the person suffering, and in doing so, made that person feel less alone in the chaos. Compare that to how grief works now. Most people get a few days off work, some cards, and then an implicit expectation that things return to normal fairly quickly, that grief should be moved through efficiently and privately. The research on what actually helps people heal from loss consistently points toward the same thing ancient humans knew instinctively, witnessed grief metabolises faster than. Hidden grief. You need other people present, not performing comfort, but genuinely being there. When was the last time someone truly sat with you in a hard moment, not to fix it, just to be there? Drop a one-word answer in the comments. It's a more revealing question than it sounds. The second thing ancient humans did was create structure. Around pain, every culture across recorded history, without exception, developed formal rituals for grief and hardship. The specifics varied wildly. Some cultures wore specific colors, some shaved their heads. Some fasted for a defined number of days. Some created temporary roles. You were a mourner with a specific set of behaviors for a specific period of time, and then there was a ritual that marked the end. And here's why that mattered psychologically. It gave grief a container. When you are inside pure emotional pain with no structure around it, the mind cannot distinguish between this is temporary suffering I will move through and this is my new reality forever. The absence of structure makes pain feel boundless, endless. Identity level. Ritual solves that problem. It says this is real, this deserves marking, and it has a shape, a beginning, a middle, and an acknowledged end. Modern psychology calls this meaning-making, and it is now considered one of the most powerful predictors of recovery from grief and trauma. Ancient humans didn't have the terminology, but they had the technology. Third, and this one surprises people, ancient humans moved there. Grief through their bodies. Mourning rituals across cultures from ancient Egypt to indigenous Australian communities to pre-colonial African societies involved physical expression as a core component. Rocking, wailing, dancing, beating the chest, rhythmic movement done in groups for hours at a time. This wasn't primitive, it was physiologically intelligent. We now know that emotional pain is stored somatically in the body's nervous system, not just in the mind's narrative. Trauma research pioneered by people like Bessel van der Kolk has demonstrated that unprocessed grief and stress live in the body as physical tension, and that physical expression, movement, sound, breath, is one of the most direct routes to releasing it. Those wailing rituals, that chest beating, that sustained rhythmic movement in community, they were doing somatic processing before the word existed, and we replaced it with try to stay composed. The fourth practice was one that alternated with the communal ones: deliberate time in nature, alone. Vision quests, fasting retreats, time spent in wilderness, these weren't just spiritual customs, they were prescribed responses to emotional crisis. The message was, go and be small. Go and be in something larger than your suffering. Let the world remind you that it continues. There is now a substantial body of research on what's called the restorative effect of natural environments on the nervous system. Time in nature measurably reduces cortisol, lowers rumination, and restores what psychologists call directed attention, the kind of focus that emotional pain completely depletes. Ancient cultures prescribed what we are now rediscovering in clinical settings. The dose of nature was part of the medicine. And then there's the last one, the practice modern life has most completely dismantled. Storytelling. Not venting, not journaling, not talking about your feelings. Specifically the act of narrating your pain as a story, with a beginning, a character who is you, obstacles, and movement toward something. Ancient humans processed suffering through myth and narrative. When something devastating happened, the community would take that experience and give it a story shape, one where the suffering had a reason, a lesson, or at minimum a place in. Something larger than the individual. Modern psychology now calls this narrative therapy and post-traumatic meaning-making. The research shows that the people who recover most fully from significant loss are not the ones who grieve hardest or longest. They are the ones who eventually find a way to give their suffering a coherent narrative arc. Your ancestors knew this. They gathered around fires and turned pain into story. Not to minimize it, but to survive it. Here's the uncomfortable summary. We have access to more mental health resources than any generation in history, and we are, by measurable outcomes, among the most psychologically distressed. Ancient humans had none of our infrastructure and some of our most effective emotional tools. They gathered, they created ritual, they moved grief through their bodies, they sought nature, and they made their suffering into story. Not all of it was healthy, some ancient grief practices were brutal, but the instinct underneath them was sound. Pain needs a container, a witness, a shape, and a place inside a larger narrative. The question isn't whether to go back, it's what to bring forward. Section 9, CTA plus close 605, 625. If this reframed something you thought you understood, share it. Send it to someone who's going through something hard. Sometimes what people need isn't advice, it's just knowing that humans have always found a way through this. Like the video if you want more of this kind of content. Subscribe, we go into history, psychology, and the science of being human every single week. And leave a comment. Which of these 4 ancient practices do you think modern life needs back the most? I'll be reading every one. See you next week.